Welcome to the CondoVultures.com podcast with your host, Peter Zalewski, a Miami real estate broker, Wall Street consultant, and expert witness. This podcast is focused on identifying real estate buying opportunities in the South Florida condo market of Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach counties. The CondoVultures.com podcast is not authorized by the South Florida real estate industry and will most likely annoy many of the region's talking heads. This podcast will feature straight talk and salty language that could be offensive to some. Please remember that past investment success does not determine future gains, especially in South Florida's volatile condo market. For more information, please visit CondoVultures.com.
Welcome to the Miami Real Estate Investing Podcast. I'm your host, Peter Zalewski, from a company called Condo Vultures. I've been in South Florida since 1993. I was a journalist for 13 years, and since 2006, I've been in the real estate world. I am a consultant. I also do some real estate brokerage, but my real love is still journalism, as well as trying to figure out what's really going on rather than a lot of the PR spin. That being said, what we decided to do is put together a podcast where we bring in current and former journalists, talk about some of the biggest stories going on in the Miami and South Florida real estate market, and give you straight talk as to what really is going on and what you should be thinking about if you are interested in either investing in this real estate market, criticizing this real estate market, or simply watching as things go up and down. So for the first time in 18 months, we are bringing back our Reporters Roundtable is what we call it. Real simple format. We bring together four current and former journalists. We kick around some story ideas. We give you some insight what's going on. Warning, there is going to be straight talk, and you're probably also going to be laughing. If you have any comments for us, if you don't like what we're saying, or if you want to fight with one individual person, feel free to do so. We will discuss it on the air. These are going to be weekly podcasts. To send an email to make your comment, please send it to inquiry@condovultures.com, inquiry@condovultures.com. Also, too, if you want to send in a video comment to us, feel free to do so. We will take your video comment. We will incorporate it into this podcast in the upcoming week, and then we will all discuss it. A couple tidbits before I introduce the people who are going to be on this podcast. Number one, you're probably listening on this podcast on a traditional platform, such as Apple, such as Google, Anchor, anything like that. However, if you want to actually watch some of the individuals, see the individuals behind the voices, what you can do is you can go to a platform that provides for video, such as Spotify. And when you go there, look for Miami Real Estate Investing Podcast, or you can simply go to YouTube. Our handle is Condo Vultures TV, Condo Vultures TV. That being said, let me go ahead. Let me introduce you to our panelists today. Again, current and former journalists. We're going to start off with Jean Gruss. Jean is a former finance reporter, banking reporter, real estate reporter. Did a lot of time in Florida. Now he has his own public relations firm called Gruss Communications. Jean's been living in Miami. Jean, how long's it been?
5 years.
You've been
5
living in
years.
Miami.
5 years.
5
But in
years.
Florida,
Oh my God,
Florida for 30 years.
In Florida for 30 years. John, we haven't done one of these podcasts in roughly 18 months or so. What have you been up to in the meantime?
It's great to be back, Peter. I've been following the market. It's an interesting market. Some of the things that we've talked about have panned out. Some haven't. And I'm excited to be back on the show with you.
Love having you back. Who else do we have? We have Oscar Musibay. Oscar was a journalist at one point out in the Los Angeles area with the Associated Press. He also did a bunch of time as a business reporter here in Miami. Now he has his own public relations firm where he's advising people how to sort of work with situations, whether they're promoting their companies and or they're doing damage control. Mr. Musibay, how you been?
Good. How's everything going?
Everything is fine. Everything is fine. I like the spiffy green. Looking really good on you.
I'm like on a safari.
Speaking of safaris, Oscar has published a book
I did.
called For the Love of
Leotards.
Leotards.
Right.
Oscar, tell us a little bit about that book and where people might be able to see you. You have been doing book readings. You did books in the Grove. You also did an event at the Old Dubliner. Definitely a hub and a mecca for culture. So how's that been going?
It's great. I mean, this last year has been one of the most interesting and exciting and adventurous years in my life. Reading the book and getting feedback from people about the book and about some of the poetry. It's very unusual, I would say. The idea is to create really strong imagery and sounds using words. to get people excited about speaking and having conversations about poetry. So thank you for mentioning it, because it's one of my biggest achievements as far as I'm concerned. So
Fantastic. Congratulations on that. Anybody wants to buy it, go to Amazon, For the Love of Leotards.
that's it. Or books and books.
Finally.
Or books and books,
Or books and books if you want to buy it in person. He'll even autograph it for you if you want. Send us an email at inquiry@condovultures.com. We'll put you in contact with Oscar.
Right.
And you can get a signed copy of the book. And finally, our third journalist on this podcast, John Fakler. John was a business writer over at the South Florida Business Journal, did it for a number of years. He then went into public relations and consulting. That's what he's doing now. Mr. Fakler, how you been? It's been 18 months since basically you pissed off some of our listeners who created a wager with you about the development and the construction of some of these buildings. So what have you been doing in these?
Hey, Peter, it's great to be back. And, listen, I'm looking forward to some more hate mail. I was definitely wrong on a few projects. And I was called out on it by a few of our listeners, but that's good. I like the interaction. I've actually moved since the last time we talked. It's been 18 months. Still in Shenandoah, but interestingly enough, I've still got issues with birds, and I've still got, as you remember, I used to get attacked by the magpies. Now I got songbirds they're so loud, they wake me up every morning. I've also got a crazy landlord who's very squirrely. He's always up my ass. So, things have changed, but things have stayed the same. Let me just put it that way.
Got it. Speaking of things changing and things staying the same, we're going to take a commercial break. The other side of the break, we're going to get into 3 articles that are published recently. We're going to kick them around. We're going to give you some insight as to what's the takeaway of what these stories mean. So we'll be right back to you right after this commercial break.
It's a simple formula, and it works. Buy low, sell high. We're Condo Vultures, and when it comes to your real estate, we help you buy low. At Condo Vultures, we represent the buyer, and now's the time to buy. Log on to condovultures.com for more information. condovultures.com. And remember, before you sell high, you have to buy low. Featured in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, 60 Minutes, and Time Magazine. Condo Vultures Realty, a licensed Florida real estate brokerage capitalizing on the condo correction since 2006.
Welcome back to the Miami Real Estate Investing Podcast. I'm your host, Peter Zalewski. This is our Reporters Roundtable program, in which we bring together current and former journalists, kick around some of the biggest news stories that have occurred, and try to give you straight talk as to what these stories actually mean. So what I will do is I will read the headline, I will read a couple of graphs from a story, and then I'm going to go to each journalist on a rotating basis to try to get some comment. If any of the other journalists who aren't, who I don't go to initially, they want to chime in, feel free to do so. And keep in mind, salty language is permissible on this particular podcast. So, Mr. Fakler, let's start off with you. You're a former Long Islander from the great state of New York. We're going to start with a New York Post story. New York Post is always entertaining. He's always got some color. So let's go to you with story number 1. New York Post headline: Miami now has priciest neighborhood in U.S. as New York City home values drop. So let me give you the lead of the story and a couple graphs. Here we go. Miami Star Island is now the nation's most expensive neighborhood, while the number of New York City areas where buying a home would set you back at least $1 million is on the decline. According to a new survey, the average price of a single-family home on Star Island, the man-made enclave off the coast of Miami Beach that's home to celebrities including Shaquille O'Neal, Gloria Estefan, Rosie O'Donnell, was valued at an eye-popping $40.2 million as of December, according to Zillow. That's another conversation, Zillow and their valuations, but we're not going to talk about that now. That's a 71% increase from the average price of $23.5 million for a home on the island just 3 years ago, according to the study, and which was cited by Bloomberg News. Finally, Ken Griffin, the hedge fund billionaire who runs Citadel, recently purchased 5 properties on the island for a combined $194 million, pushing Star Island to the top of the Zillow rankings for the priciest neighborhood. Mr. Fakler, as a former New Yorker who's been living down here in Miami for quite some time, you've seen cheap real estate, you've seen expensive real estate. What do you make of the fact that this Star Island neighborhood has gone up to $40.2 million from a general area of $23.5 million simply 3 years ago? Is this sustainable? Is this something that's going to last? Is this irrational exuberance?
First off, I'm not really surprised by the report because I don't know if you remember when we talked about this 18 months ago, was that there's been a sort of a migration out of New York. People are they're sick of the taxes, they're sick of the crime, the cost of living, and a lot of businesses have been moving down here. So hearing this doesn't really surprise me. Also, Star Island, again, we have a lot of international rich people who are looking for places to stay. So, that doesn't surprise me. What's interesting about this particular article, buried in the story, is that also San Francisco, very much like New York, also had a huge decrease in prices. They also cited the same reasons: crime in San Francisco, cost of living, all these other issues. So, in a way, that doesn't surprise me either. I mean, they both dropped a huge amount, I think it was 20+% in pricing. While, Miami, again, it's its own little enclave. Miami doesn't play by the rules. It's got its own situations, especially with the international and wealthy visitors.
Now, Mr. Fakler, during the pandemic, and thank God it's kindness for the most part, at least it's somewhat controlled, if you will. During the pandemic, state of Florida was open. Anybody could come down here, wear a mask, don't wear a mask. While in New York, you had to wear a mask both places you went. And you saw a lot of people working from home. They called it a hybrid model where you could work from home. You wouldn't have to go in the office. Now they're starting to talk about many companies looking to bring back employees 3 days a week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, possibly also Monday, but never again Friday. My question to you is, does it stick? All these New Yorkers who pranced down here, bought real estate, ran up the prices, are they going to stick around? Or now, as they have to start to go into the office 3 days a week, are they simply going to forsake South Florida, South Beach, go back, work on their liver, trying to build back up their bank account because they pissed away too much cash, and basically only come down here to vacation? So the question is, are the New Yorkers who moved down here, the Californians who moved down here, are they here to stay, or are we going to see a pullback in pricing as we go forward?
It's an interesting question. There's still a lot of COVID cash, as they call it, in the economy. So people, I guess we'll talk about this with the stories, but despite the inflation, people are still buying, and they're still buying real estate. And, real estate's part of that. So I don't know, that's a good question, but I really don't know down the road what's going to happen. I think there's too many question marks with the economy right now. Stock market's still shaky. So, I don't see New Yorkers who came down here moving back. I think once they're here, they're going to stay here unless something requires them to go back to New York, their offices back in New York. That might be something that goes down. I don't know. So we'll have to wait and see.
So for the record, John Fakler says the New Yorkers down here, they're never going back. So a year from now, if they do go back, Mr. Fakler, we'll make sure to bring
of course
that
you
up.
will.
Now, story number 2. Let's go to Oscar. Oscar, this is coming out of the Real Deal headline. Active agents in Miami drop 36% of the year as market cools. Here's the first couple graphs of this story written by Cade Hinch. Miami's residential market is cooling after nearly 3 years of frenzy, and realtors are dropping like flies. The pool of City of Miami active agents shrunk by 36.3% in the fourth quarter of last year compared to the same period of 2021. According to a report by Agent Story, a Miami-based company that tracks agents and their deals, the report found that Miami had 4,529 active agents as of the fourth quarter, down 2,580 year over year. Agent Story defines active agents as listing, co-listing, and buyer's agents involved in residential sales in the quarter. Essentially, that's how many realtors make their money. Oscar, before I ask you to comment, I want people to be aware, generally speaking, if somebody gets a real estate license, then they go and they join a club called the Realtors Association, much like a golfer joining a country club and paying to have dues. What they get as a realtor, person who's joined this club, they get access to this multiple listing service, which is a database that realtors use to market property. It's the same sort of resource that's used by Zillow and others. So my question to you, for $1,000 a year as a member of the Realtor Association, and you're not doing deals, are you likely to re-any and pay that grand in 2023? Or are you simply going to say, I don't know where the market's going, there's no supply, it's uncertain there's uncertainty in the economy, let me go do something else and save that grand until the market's ready for me to go ahead and do some business. So Oscar, what's your take? 36% drop in number of realtors in Miami year over year. What do you make of that?
I'm guessing that it has to do with frustration on the part of the brokers, because they have to be able to access inventory to sell properties, to transact. And there's a challenge there because, as usual, the most successful brokers are doing deals, but maybe the second and third level uh, associates are not. And at some point, there has to be a uh, a breaking point. And I just read something that we have 6 months of inventory. So if that's the case, then there's inventory, but I think it's more about what people are looking for and where. And the hottest areas have a lot of activity. So I'm not sure exactly what is causing this result. Does anybody else know on this roundtable?
They're not making money, dude. Deals aren't trading. The deals that are trading at high prices, and the discount buyers simply are sitting on the sidelines. The Fed is continuing to raise interest rates. Nobody knows what the future is. And if you eat what you kill, like these realtors do, if you're not making money, do you really want to burn $1,000 a year on belonging to a club where you can't even use the amenities?
Right.
Is my take. John, what do you make of it? John, what do you
Right.
make
So
of it?
I think the increase in mortgage rates have more than doubled. Nobody wants to sell their house because when they sell their house, maybe they got a mortgage at 3.5. And now if they sell their house, they're looking at a mortgage at 7.5. They don't want to move. Sellers don't want to sell for a lower price than what they paid. They still think they've got a lottery ticket. Um, and prices are not falling. In fact, prices have barely budged. And meanwhile, mortgage rates have doubled. So your payments have doubled. And that doesn't even take into account insurance and taxes and all the other things that you have to pay for. So basically the market's frozen. And when the market's frozen and there are no transactions, then real estate agents ain't making any money. It doesn't matter if the market's going up or down, but real estate agents need transactions. They need activity in the market. And when there's no activity, there's no business. So I'm not surprised that we've had a huge attrition in the number of agents out there. Plus, you've had so many agents jump into the market in the past couple of years because it was a veritable bonanza of activity. And now that it's come to a screeching halt because of the interest rate increases and mortgage rate increases. So no transactions. Starve or look for another job.
Thinning of the herd. Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. John, let's stick with you for story number 3. Story number 3 is coming out of CBS4, the CBS network down here in Miami. And let me preface this with saying the mayor of Miami was he was competing against the mayor of New York City to make Miami the crypto capital of the United States, or possibly even the world. A lot of the so-called crypto bros were coming down, descending upon Miami, going to some of these conferences. There is a crypto bull that's placed right outside Miami-Dade College, the college where the Miami Book Fair is put on every year. By the way, it's across the street from where the federal prison is, but that's a different story. But anyways, Miami was this place for crypto. It was this place where everybody talking about Bitcoin and Ethereum and you name it, Solana, they were all here. This was the place to be. So it made sense that one of the largest crypto exchanges in the world, they would want to have naming rights on the arena where the Miami Heat basketball teams play, a place where all the concerts are put on. It was like, it made all the sense in the world. It was like a landmark type of this. So that being said, let me go ahead and read you the headline and some of the stories, John, and I want to comment. FTX Arena, home of the Miami Heat, redubbed the Miami-Dade Arena. FTX Arena, the sports stadium in South Florida, the NBA's Miami Heat calls home, will now be called the Miami-Dade Arena, the team said. The change comes just days after U.S. bankruptcy judge John Dorsey ruled in favor of Miami-Dade County, which had asked to have FTX's name stripped from the stadium in wake of the cryptocurrency trading company's sudden collapse. Termination of the naming rights deal between FTX Arena, which declared bankruptcy back in November, and Florida County shall be effective immediately upon entry of this order, Dorsey wrote in his. The Heat tweeted its new arena name and said removing the FTX branding element will be ongoing in the coming weeks. John, what do you make of the fact that FTX at one point the Miami Arena, or Miami-Dade Arena, I should say, as like this landmark, this reinforcement of Miami being the capital of cryptocurrency in not only the United States, but possibly the world. And now suddenly it's gone. It's we were talking bankruptcy. We're talking about possible criminal charges involved with individuals related with FTX.
Right. I mean, it's a marketing black eye for Miami. I mean, it's a bit of a PR disaster because FTX was such a high profile corporate relocation to Miami, and the whole crypto mania. And now the regulators, of course, the FTX scandal, billions of dollars lost, and the regulators are now all over crypto. And it looks like there's already been a ton of enforcement actions against crypto firms, and the value of cryptocurrencies has declined significantly, including Miami's own crypto coin, which is now worth next to nothing. Miami Coin, you'll remember, was launched a couple of years ago and is down like 99.8% now. It's just real unfortunate because I think, legitimately speaking, I think it was a valiant effort to attract technology companies to Miami as a source of diversification and jobs. And I do think that Miami can still remain an attractive place for technology companies. It's just a shame that, crypto has taken the limelight. And unfortunately, I mean, this is not the end of the crypto scandals. We're going to see a lot more regulatory enforcement, unfortunately, because it was basically the Wild West. And there've been a lot of scammers in the sector. And so we're gonna see a lot more enforcement, and unfortunately, it's likely that Miami will suffer as a result. But once again, a marketing black eye. But I think Miami can recover if it really refocuses on attracting quality technology companies that are well established. Thinking the Googles, the Microsofts, and those kinds of companies that can really help diversify Miami's economy from just a tourist and real estate economy. So hoping for the best, but certainly a setback for Miami.
And speaking of a setback, there was a Washington Post article that detailed how the number of $20,000 bar tabs is down dramatically. So some of the nightclubs in Miami are being forced to adjust how they cater to some of their clientele. So that being said, we're going to take a commercial break. On the side of the break, we're going to get into 3 more stories with our...
This is Peter Zalewski of the Condo Vultures podcast. I hope you're enjoying the podcast. And I wanted to alert you that if you have a property that you're looking to sell in the Tri-County, South Florida area, I would encourage you to reach out to Jenny Cortez, a licensed real estate broker with CVRrealty.com. She's my partner. She's been in the business for north of 15 years. More importantly, she knows the market. She knows how to get a deal done. And she also realizes that it's more important to get a price that you can accept and sell the property rather than to hold firm on some price that's never going to be achieved and ultimately languish on the market. So if you're looking to do a deal that you want a skilled expert who can help you sell a property, reach out to Jenny Cortez at 305-865-5859, 305-865-5859, or visit her website, cvrrealty.com.
Welcome back to Miami Real Estate Investing Podcast. I'm your host, Peter Zalewski from Condo Vultures. This is a reporter's roundtable where we bring together current and former journalists, kick around some of the biggest real estate stories and economic stories going on that might impact the local South Florida condo market as well as the real estate market. We discussed 3 stories in the last segment. We're going to get into another 3. We're going to start off with John Gruss, who has his own public relations firm called Gruss Communications. John, what's the website where he wants to get in touch with you about?
It's GrussPR.com, GRUSSPR.com.
Perfect. John, let's go to you with this story coming out of CNBC. Headline: Wall Street's purchased hundreds of thousands of single-family homes since the Great Recession. Here's what that means for rental prices. I'm going to give you 3 bullet points that come out of the article. Bullet point number 1, corporations backed by private equity groups like Blackstone and Pretium Partners bought tens of thousands of homes across the U.S. Sunbelt. Point number 2, detached house prices have increased more quickly in key Sunbelt states than the national average. And point number 3, institutional investors do not yet control large market share in housing, but analysts but analysts writing at MetLife Management suggest that could change by 2030. Sean, is it good that Wall Street is going to own all of the traditional rentals where people need to come in and basically try to rent the place? Before you used to be able to do it without a credit score, put down a deposit. If the landlord liked you, he or she would shake your hand, you do a deal on the spot and make it happen. It was far less corporate than going into one of these buildings with 400 units. We're talking about single family houses that are being turned into rentals. What do you make of the story?
Well, first of all, I disagree with the premise that institutional investors are going to own a huge chunk of residential real estate. And part of the reason is that many of them bought at unreasonable high prices. And now that the market's slowing down, a lot of their investors want out of real estate. And there've been a lot of redemptions, and they're going to have to unload some of the properties that they bought. And that is going to be a very interesting phenomenon, because I think that's going to lead to a drop in prices, and it could also lead to a drop in rents. Already in the Sunbelt markets like Phoenix and Austin, I mean, we're reading that the real estate markets are really slowing down significantly there. And I think eventually that's going to make its way to Florida. And my personal opinion is that a lot of institutional investors are going to be faced with rents that don't cover their investments, and their investors are not going to be happy about it. And I think that's going to be a self-perpetuating cycle, a downward cycle. And in my opinion, and I may be wrong, but I'm sort of forecasting that a lot of institutional investors are going to start selling properties, and they're going to be selling them pretty quickly as the tide turns. But I mean, I've been wrong before, but I think the forecast that institutional investors are going to own this vast amount of residential real estate, if the returns are not there for them, I think it's a little bit premature to say that they're going to be, the major landlords in the U.S.
Very interesting. I would tell you, as a rule of thumb, there's kind of a 1% rule. Whatever the purchase price is, you ought to be able to collect 1% of that monthly in terms of your rent. Real simple. You got a $100,000 property, you need to be bringing in effectively $1,000 a month. So when you see some of these properties trading for $350,000 per unit in a duplex, that means they need $3,500 a month in rent. And as strong as rents are, some of these neighborhoods where they're asking $3,500 a month, I don't know how it's going to fly. So I would tend to agree with you, John. Oscar, let's go to you with story number 2. You are a homeowner. You own a place in South Beach, and your place in South Beach is obviously within a flood zone. We had a major disaster down here. We had the collapse of a condo tower. Ultimately, it led to the deaths of 100 people. And the settlement from everybody who was potentially involved came out to about $1 billion, $1 billion with a B. So that's the background. Let me give you the headline and the story, and I want to get your comments. This is coming out of the Real Deal. Headline: $1 billion Surfside settlement signals condo associations and construction insurance premium hikes. Subhead: insurers may require contractors, developers to monitor work on new projects work more closely. And first couple of graphs. The $1 billion plus Surfside settlement marks a milestone in the lawsuit of a deadly condominium collapse. It also reveals the role of real estate insurance and is a harbinger of premium hikes that could reverberate across the industry. The insurance carriers for 31 entities are contributing towards the $1.02 billion total disbursement. All who settled have denied any wrongdoing and liability. While the condo and project construction premiums were steadily rising before the Champlain Tower South collapsed last summer, killing 98 people, the cave-in sent condo association insurance costs skyrocketing and could push construction insurance premiums even higher. Oscar, why don't you give us a first-person account? What's happened at your condo where you live? Have your dues increased? And are there more requirements in terms of the safety of your building? What's your take as somebody who's a homeowner on the ground? What have you experienced as a result of increased valuations of property in South Florida since the pandemic, as well as the horrible disaster that occurred in Surfside with the collapse of the Champlain Tower South Tower?
Thanks, Peter, for the question. So the bottom line is that costs are up across the board, whether it's construction, insurance, water, everything is up. So we're in the process of examining different scenarios for doing some maintenance to the building, and the prices are outrageous. But in reality, we have very little alternative because with inflation and everything else that's going on with supplies being more expensive, the supply chain is more complicated than it has been in the past. And materials are more, contractors are more, et cetera. So everyone's looking at bigger bills, which means maintenance fees are probably going to have to go up in a lot of buildings, even small buildings and older buildings. So whether it's a high rise or something else, when it's time to do maintenance and some of these other things, it's going to be costly.
Oscar, for perspective, ballpark, how much would you say your condo association fees percentage wise have increased in the last year to 2 years, basically before and after Champagne Tower South collapse, the disaster?
About
Wow.
50%.
50?
Yes. 50%.
Oscar, it's a real strong housing market, some will say. Have you considered selling? And if not, why?
No. I mean, my family is here and I would not sell. And I think John was referencing this earlier. If you sell in this market, where are you going to go exactly? I mean, everything is so expensive that in reality, you're going to try and hold on to what you have and ride it out because there is limited opportunity to stay in this market and you can't find anything that's better. Probably if you've owned your property for some time, that's probably the best deal you got. So I think it's going to be hard, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, Mr. Fakler, let's go to you with our last story, just story number 6. This is coming from U.S. News and World Report. Miami housing market forecast. That's the headline subhead. Despite few housing permits and growing inventory, Miami loan prices are up and buyers are active. Now, I'm going to read you a couple graphs and we'll get into it. It says, one of the true international cities in the United States, Miami is considered the gateway to Latin America, not just culturally. It's a meeting place for significant amounts of international businesses, and those who frequent Miami commonly opt to purchase real estate in the metro area as well, whether to stay there when visiting for business, live there full-time, or rent out as investment properties. But Miami's international influence doesn't make it immune to trends occurring in other parts of the U.S., especially when it comes to real estate. In many ways, it appears Miami is heading the turn towards a buyer's market over many parts of the country. With the higher housing inventory and low home builder confidence, though, it doesn't necessarily feel that way on the ground in this metro area. So, John, what they're saying is that it feels real good right now in the housing market, but there's some bad signs. There's some stuff brewing under the surface, if you will. So, I'm wondering, as somebody who's been in South Florida since the 80s, what's your take on it? Is this the call before the storm? Is this the frenzy before it collapses? Or is this simply a situation where Miami's evolved and anymore?
It has evolved into something it really wasn't before. And that was, a huge international market that is sort of immune from the rest of the real estate market. I mean, I think we talked a little bit about this earlier, why prices are staying up, because people just want to be here. You have corporations wanting to come here, businesses coming here. You have the internationals coming here and staying here. And, you don't really have a market like that elsewhere in the country. So it's unique. And because it's unique, it's sort of immune from the other pressures on the real estate market. That said, if interest rates keep going up, if other issues, come to the forefront, I think eventually, like you mentioned earlier, it's going to catch up with Miami. Eventually, right now, it's sort of like a sweet spot. They're immune to what's going on. But I think 6 months to a year down the road, it's going to be a different story.
Interesting. Okay, let's go ahead. We'll take a commercial break. Other side of the break, we're going to get into our wrap-up.
This is Peter Zalewski of the Condo Vultures podcast. Before I started doing these podcasts, I was in the business of being a licensed real estate broker, a contributing columnist for the Miami Herald, as well as the Miami Real Deal, but also extra witness work in consulting. So if you are looking for an expert witness, or if you're looking for consulting services, a straight talk perspective as to what's going on in a particular marketplace, a building or what happened previously for whatever your situation is, whether you are an attorney, whether you are a institutional fund looking to invest, or whether you're a lender who's trying to come up with some sort of strategy and approach for your lending committee going forward. I just might be able to help you. To get a hold of me, please reach out to Peter@CondoVultures.com. That's Peter@CondoVultures.com, or give me a call to the office at 305-865-5859, 305-865-5859.
Welcome back to Miami Real Estate Investing Podcast. I'm your host, Peter Zalewski of Condo Vultures. This is the Reporters Roundtable. This is our first roundtable we've done in roughly about 18 months or so. So we're working it out. We're figuring out some of the kinks. If you see in some of the video, it suddenly gets dark. Well, that's because the sun's going down and we weren't necessarily prepared. But if you stick with us, we're going to start to perfect it as we go forward. It's a work in progress. We're all basically a goal. That's bringing straight talk to a real estate market, which has a lot of embellishments. In the future, we're going to be using this segment to discuss some of the emails that are submitted, commenting, basically asking questions, criticizing, complimenting, that type of thing. But given the fact that this is our first Reporters Roundtable in 18 months, let me just get a parting thought from each of you, and then we're going to wrap up this particular Reporters Roundtable. Why don't we start with John, and we'll work our way to John Fakler. John, what's a parting thought as we begin this Reporter Roundtable quest once again after an 18-month absence?
Don't fight the Fed. The Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve is hiking interest rates, and they're gonna try to clamp down on inflation. And what that means is higher borrowing costs, and of course, higher borrowing costs is going to affect real estate, and we are not immune. So that's my parting thought.
Fantastic. And that's definitely some great insight. Mr. Musibay, what is your parting thought for our listeners as well as viewers? And again, if you're listening to this podcast on a traditional platform and you actually want to watch it, go to any platform that permits it, such as Spotify. If you want to watch us on YouTube, handle is Condo Vultures TV. Mr. Musibay, how about a parting thought on your behalf?
So I think my parting thought is I encourage everyone to get engaged in their neighborhoods, because Miami is changing quickly and we need to be invested in how it changes.
Great point. Great point as well. And Mr. Fakler, you're somebody who's been here since the 80s. You just moved in a different part of Shenandoah. Some would call it Little Havana, but that's semantics. Doesn't really matter. What would you say your parting thought is for all of the viewers?
From my own personal experience, moving around all different parts of South Florida, I would say to be location. Be very conscious of where you're living, where you're moving. Try to find a place that's great for work and for play. A place that's convenient, because I think once you get there, whether it's a rental or you're buying, you're not going to be moving anywhere for a while, considering what's going on with the economy.
Great point. Another great point. And my final parting thought would be the market is good until it's not. And once it's not, you know it, and you know it fast, and you can't get out. So keep that in mind. If anybody wants to send an email, as mentioned, you want to comment, you want to criticize, you want to ask a question, please send an email to inquiry@condovultures.com. Let me thank our panelists. We have Jean Gruss. John's a former journalist. Did it for 30 plus years? Is that what it was,
30
John?
plus years, yes.
30 plus years. You now have your own public relations consulting firm. If anybody wants to look you up, they can go to GrussPR.com. That's GRUSSPR.com. And I also want to thank Oscar Musibay. He was a longtime journalist, worked out in Los Angeles covering entertainment industry, as well as wrote about business and real estate here in the Miami area. Oscar, if anybody wants to buy your book, or if they want to reach out to you related to public relations and marketing, which is your current gig, what's the best way for them to reach you and to buy that book?
So they can reach me at Musibay, so MUSIBAY @gmail.com. And then also I would encourage you to buy the book from Books and Books. You can access it online, booksandbooks.com. And they're a great bookstore. If you're in town, you need to stop there. There's many locations. And let me know what you think. I'd love to hear your feedback.
Great. And Mr. Fakler, you were a journalist for, I don't know how many decades. You worked over at the South Florida Business Journal. You wrote about business. You wrote about white-collar crime. You actually did restaurant reviews, although I wouldn't necessarily agree with some of your final reviews, but that's up for debate. If anybody wants to reach out to you related to consulting or publishing,
just drop me an email. That's JTFNY2 @gmail.
That just rolls off the tongue. What is it again?
JTFNY for New York, the number 2 @gmail.
Fantastic. Let me just encourage you, if you're listening or watching this podcast, we would encourage you to subscribe, whether it be on YouTube, where our handle is Condo Vultures TV, whether it's on Spotify, where you can simply look up Miami Real Estate Investing, or you can go to Apple, Google, any and all of the above. Be sure to touch base next week. We're going to continue this going forward. We will have rotating journalists giving you some straight talk as to what's really going on in the Miami real estate market. Until next time, I'm Peter Zalewski, Condo Vultures. Thanks for tuning in. Take care of yourself. Ciao, ciao.
All right. Don't buy a South Florida condo, discounted or distressed, before taking a Condo Vultures correction tour. CondoVultures.com offers weekly bus and walking tours that focus on educating buyers on the how-tos of identifying discounted condos, analyzing the opportunities, and purchasing units. Every tour attendee receives a list of all condo projects in a particular market, a market assessment handout, and unmatched expert analysis. For more information on the condo correction tours, please visit condovultures.eventbrite.com.